In the shadow-laden, foreboding realm of Netheria, where the skies bled perpetual twilight and the winds whispered of ancient sorrows, Prince Kale, a figure both feared and revered, stood atop the obsidian cliffs, his piercing crimson eyes, glowing like embers in the murky darkness, surveyed the realm with a gaze as sharp as the jagged thrones of his forefathers. His smoldering black hair, wild and untamed as the demonic winds that swept through Netheria, cascaded over his broad shoulders, framing a visage carved from the very essence of night. Beneath the stern facade, Kale's heart, forged in the infernal fires of his homeland, had grown cold and unyielding, tempered by centuries of contempt for humanity. He despised their world, a realm so starkly contrasting his own, brimming with light and life, yet so fragile and fleeting. He yearned with a burning intensity to engulf it in the chaos that was his birthright, to see their cities crumble and their hopes turn to ashes in the wind. His father, the Demon King, a figure of immense power and dark majesty, echoed these sentiments with a voice that rumbled like thunder through the endless halls of their dark palace. He nurtured Kale's disdain, filling his son's mind with tales of betrayal and conflict, of the inherent weakness and folly of humankind. In the firelit chambers of the royal keep, amidst the echoes of ancient war songs and the clinking of obsidian goblets, the Demon King molded his heir into a weapon of vengeance, a harbinger of the apocalypse for the human realm. Yet, in the quietest hours of the night, when the world seemed to hold its breath, a flicker of something unnameable stirred within Kale's soul. Hidden beneath layers of scorn and derision, there lay an unspoken, almost forbidden curiosity about the human world. It was a world he had been taught to loathe, yet one he could not help but be intrigued by. Their capacity for love and joy, their resilience in the face of despair, the kaleidoscope of their cultures and beliefs, all these were mysteries to him, tales whispered by the winds that slipped through the barriers between their worlds. This curiosity was a small, persistent ember in the vast, dark coldness of his heart, an ember that refused to be extinguished, flickering defiantly against the backdrop of his ingrained hatred. It was an ember that, unbeknownst to Kale, would one day ignite a blaze powerful enough to change the course of his life and the fate of the worlds he knew. Cloaked in the veil of night, a darkness deeper than the blackest sky, Kale, Prince of Netheria, ventured into the human realm. His arrival was like a whisper of a shadow, silent and unseen, as he traversed the boundary that separated worlds. The lands he entered were bathed in moonlight, their serene beauty a stark contrast to the brooding skies of his own domain. Kale moved with a predator's grace, his eyes, crimson as freshly spilled blood, scanning the unfamiliar landscape with a mixture of contempt and clandestine fascination. His first encounter with the humans was in a small, slumbering village, where the only light came from flickering candles behind closed windows. As he walked, a shroud of dread seemed to follow, an unspoken omen that stirred the villagers from their sleep. Their reactions were immediate and visceral, cries of fear, faces blanched with terror, eyes wide with the instinctive knowledge of the presence of something otherworldly, something malevolent. Kale, standing amidst the ensuing chaos, found a bitter satisfaction in their fear. Their terror was a tangible testament to the power he wielded, a power born of darkness and honed by centuries of loathing. It justified the hatred that had been instilled in him since birth, the hatred he was taught to nurture and embrace as his destiny. Yet, amidst the echoes of their screams and the hurried slamming of doors, a seed of doubt began to take root in the recesses of Kale's mind. He watched the humans, so frail and so fleeting, gripped by a fear that was as natural as it was instinctual. They were creatures of flesh and blood, driven by the same desires to live and love, to protect what they cherished. This realization, though faint and easily overshadowed by his ingrained disdain, started to gnaw at him, igniting a flicker of doubt. This doubt was a quiet, persistent voice, questioning the purpose of this endless enmity, this inherited vendetta against a species so different, yet in some fundamental ways so similar. Why did they fear him? Was it merely because of the stories they had been told, the legends passed down through generations? Or was it because of something more inherent, a primal fear of the unknown, of the darkness that he represented? As Cale stood there, amidst the silence that followed the storm of fear, he found himself at a crossroads of introspection. The night air, cool and crisp, seemed to whisper secrets, urging him to look beyond the veil of hatred that had clouded his vision for so long. This moment, under the watchful gaze of the moon, marked the beginning of a journey not just through the human realm, but through the uncharted territories of his own heart and soul. In the midst of his wanderings through the human realm, Cale stumbled upon a clearing bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. There, amidst the dance of light and shadows, he encountered Lila, a human girl who seemed to embody the very essence of the world he had long scorned. She was an image of serenity, her eyes as clear and tranquil as the azure sky above, reflecting a world untainted by the darkness of Netheria. Her hair, cascading in gentle waves, shimmered with the hues of golden wheat, capturing the last rays of the sun in a halo of light around her. Cale watched her from the shadows, his presence unnoticed, his usual aura of menace subdued by a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Lila moved with a grace and ease that spoke of a life unburdened by the shadows that plagued his own existence. Her laughter, light and unguarded, filled the air, resonating in a corner of Cale's heart he had long thought dormant. When their eyes finally met, it was not with the fear and hostility he had come to expect from humans. Instead, Lila regarded him with a curious innocence, an unspoken kindness that seemed to reach out to him across the divide of their two worlds. Her gaze did not waver in the face of his fearsome appearance, a visage crafted to invoke terror and submission. This absence of fear, this genuine warmth she exuded towards him, puzzled Cale deeply. It was a reaction so alien to him, yet so profoundly moving. Drawn to her like a moth to a flame, Cale found himself stepping into the light, his usual reticence overshadowed by a compelling desire to understand this human girl who looked at him not as a demon prince but as a person. There was an inexplicable warmth in her presence, a soothing balm to the cold, relentless storm that raged within him. It was a sensation that defied the centuries of hatred and prejudice ingrained in his very being. As they began to converse, the words flowing awkwardly at first, Cale experienced a cascade of emotions previously foreign to him. Lila's voice, soft and melodious, seemed to weave a spell around him, easing the harsh edges of his nature. Her laughter, free and unbridled, stirred something within him, a sense of longing for a life unshackled from the burdens of his birthright. Their conversations, often stretching into the twilight hours, became a sanctuary for Cale. In Lila's company, he found a peace he had never known, her simple yet profound outlook on life challenging the very foundations of his beliefs. She spoke of her world with a passion that ignited a similar passion in him, a passion to understand, to experience, and perhaps to belong. Cale's fascination with Lila grew with each passing day, evolving into a deep, undeniable connection. She became a beacon of light in his dark world, a symbol of all the beauty and goodness he had been taught to despise, yet now found himself inexplicably drawn to. In her presence, the walls he had built around his heart began to crumble, revealing a path to redemption he never knew existed. As the days melted into each other, the once improbable paths of Cale and Lila became increasingly entwined, weaving a tapestry of moments that defied the boundaries of their disparate worlds. In the quiet solitude of the forest where they often met, away from the prying eyes of the world, a friendship as delicate as it was forbidden began to blossom. It was a connection that defied explanation, rooted in a mutual curiosity and a shared sense of understanding that transcended their inherent differences. Cale, who had walked the earth with a heart encased in ice, felt the warmth of human companionship through Lila. Her laughter was a melody that echoed in the emptiness of his existence, filling it with a lightness he had never known. The way she saw the world, untainted by the shadows of his own realm, opened his eyes to new perspectives, to possibilities he had never dared to contemplate. In a moment of vulnerability, under the starlit sky that served as their only witness, Kale revealed his true identity to Lila. His voice trembled with the weight of 1,000 years of solitude and fear as he unveiled the truth of his lineage, expecting her to recoil in horror at the revelation that he was the demon prince of Netheria, a being of darkness and destruction. To his profound surprise, Lila's reaction was not one of fear or disgust, but of an empathy so deep it seemed to reach into the very core of his being. She did not step back in horror. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes not reflecting terror, but a profound understanding that pierced through the layers of his guarded persona. It was as if she saw beyond the Prince of Darkness, beyond the heir to a throne of shadows, and saw Kale the individual, a soul caught in a web of circumstance and expectation. This acceptance, this unspoken embrace of his true self, began to chip away at the walls Kale had meticulously built around his heart. Each shared smile, each conversation that delved into their hopes and fears, each moment of comfortable silence, removed another brick from the fortress he had constructed. Lila's empathy and understanding acted like a gentle tide, eroding the barriers of doubt and hatred that had confined his heart. As their friendship deepened, Kale found himself more and more at ease in her presence, able to express thoughts and emotions he had long suppressed. He shared stories of Netheria, of its beauty and its pain, of the burden of being born into a legacy of darkness. Lila listened, her heart open and her mind free of judgment, providing a safe harbor for Kale's turbulent thoughts and feelings. In Lila, Kale found not just a friend, but a mirror reflecting a version of himself he had never dared to acknowledge, a version that longed for peace, for connection, for a chance to rewrite his destiny. Her kindness acted as a key, unlocking the chains of his birthright, and setting free a part of him that yearned for something more than the legacy of strife and destruction he was born into. In her, he found the first true companion of his long, solitary existence, and with her, the hope for a new path, one illuminated by the light of empathy and understanding. As the leaves turned and the winds whispered of change, dark tidings reached Kale, borne on the wings of ominous ravens. Word had spread like a shadow across the realms. A brewing war between Netheria and the human world was imminent. This news, heavy and foreboding, descended upon Kale like a shroud, casting a pall over the rare peace he had found in Lila's company. Kale, heir to the throne of Netheria, felt the weight of his lineage and the expectations of his realm bearing down upon him. His duty as a prince, as the future demon king, called for him to stand with his father, to lead their kind into battle, to fulfill the destiny that had been scripted for him since birth. The very thought of war, of bringing ruin to the world that Lila held dear, ignited a turmoil within him, a storm of conflict that raged with each beat of his conflicted heart. The fear of his father's wrath was a constant shadow that loomed over him, a dark reminder of the consequences of defiance. The Demon King's fury was not just a tempest of anger, it was a cataclysmic force, capable of laying waste to anything that dared oppose his will. Kale had seen firsthand the devastation wrought by his father's displeasure, and the thought of invoking such fury was a chilling prospect. Yet, as daunting as his father's wrath was, the thought of a world without Lila, a world scarred and broken by the ravages of war, filled him with an even deeper sense of dread. Lila had become more than just a friend. She was a beacon of hope in his life, a symbol of the life he yearned to have, one not mired in the legacy of hatred and destruction. The thought of losing her, of seeing the light in her eyes dimmed by sorrow and loss, was unbearable. The nights grew longer as Kale wrestled with his dilemma, torn between the relentless pull of duty and the whispers of his heart. His once clear path, marked by the certainties of his birthright, now forked into two, each leading to a future fraught with uncertainty and peril. On one side lay allegiance to his realm, to the bloodline that coursed through his veins, calling him to war. On the other side lay the possibility of a different life, a life with Lila, a life where love and understanding might bridge the chasm between their worlds. In the quiet hours of the night, Kale would venture to the edge of the forest, gazing up at the stars that blanketed the sky, seeking answers in their ancient light. The stars, silent and distant, offered no guidance, reflecting back the turmoil in his soul. With each passing day, the drumbeat of war grew louder, and with it, the urgency to make a choice that would define not just his fate, but the fate of two worlds. Cale stood at the precipice of destiny, caught in the eye of a storm of his own making, a storm that threatened to engulf everything he held dear. The battle within him raged on, a battle not of swords and sorcery, but of loyalty and love, duty and desire. The path he would choose remained shrouded in the mists of uncertainty, a decision that would shape the future in ways he could scarcely imagine. In a moment that would forever alter the course of his life, Cale unearthed a truth buried deep within the annals of Netherian history, a truth that lay hidden beneath layers of rage and revenge. It was during a clandestine visit to the ancient library of Netheria, a place where time seemed to stand still amidst scrolls and tomes older than the realms themselves, that Cale stumbled upon the origins of his father's deep-seated hatred for humanity. The truth was a tale of betrayal, a wound etched into the very soul of the Demon King. It spoke of a time long past, when Netheria and the human world were not as distant, a time of tentative coexistence. In this forgotten era, the Demon King, then a young prince, had formed an alliance with a human kingdom, an alliance sealed with promises of mutual respect and understanding. However, this bond was shattered by an act of treachery. The human kingdom, swayed by fear and misunderstanding of the demon realm, broke the alliance, leading to a devastating conflict that scarred both realms. The betrayal cut deep into the heart of the young prince, forging the ember of hatred that would grow into an inferno that consumed any chance of peace between the two worlds. As Cale read the ancient script, the words blurred before his eyes, the weight of centuries of animosity pressing down upon him. He realized then that the hatred he had been taught to harbor, the hatred that coursed through the veins of every Netherian, was the legacy of a pain long past, a pain that had grown and festered through generations, losing its true face and becoming a shadow of blind rage. This revelation shook Cale to his core. The war, the endless cycle of hatred, suddenly seemed so futile, a tragic play on the stage of history, repeating the same sorrowful lines. He began to question the destiny that had been laid out for him, a path marked by the footsteps of retribution and wrath. Could it be that the enmity between Netheria and the human world was but the echo of a long-forgotten pain, a pain that perhaps no longer held meaning in the present? Cale's heart, once frozen in the chill of inherited prejudice, began to thaw in the light of understanding. The walls that had confined his thoughts, built brick by brick on the foundation of ancestral spite, started to crumble. He pondered over the possibility of a different destiny, one not written in the blood of past grievances, but forged in the hope of reconciliation. The more Cale dwelt on this newfound knowledge, the more he realized the power of forgiveness and understanding. Perhaps it was not too late to change the course of history, to heal the wounds that had divided their worlds for so long. This epiphany ignited a spark within him, a spark that challenged the darkness of his lineage and kindled a flame of hope for a future where peace could bloom in the ashes of forgotten enmity. Cale now found himself at a crossroads, armed with the knowledge of the past and the uncertainty of the future. The choice before him was daunting: to follow the path laid out by generations of hatred, or to carve a new path, one that led towards understanding and perhaps one day harmony between Netheria and the human world. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but armed with the truth, Cale felt a newfound strength to confront the shadows of the past and embrace the light of a possible new dawn. As the days unfurled like petals of a midnight rose, Cale found himself increasingly drawn into the orbit of Lila's presence, her very essence a balm to the tempestuous storm that raged within him. The more time he spent with her, the deeper his feelings grew, transforming from a mere fascination to a profound emotion that he had never experienced in the dark corridors of Netheria. Love, a word once foreign and abstract to him, began to take root in the fertile ground of his heart, blooming into a beautiful, if improbable, reality. In Lila's company, Cale discovered a solace he had never known. Her laughter was like a melody that soothed his age-old scars, her smile a beacon that lit up the darkest corners of his soul. Their conversations, often stretching into the starlit hours, were a tapestry of discovery, revealing to Cale the multifaceted beauty of humanity. Through her eyes, he began to see a world rich in emotions, in resilience and compassion, a stark contrast to the one-dimensional portrait he had been painted of humans in his realm. Cale's perception of humans underwent a dramatic shift, much like the changing of seasons, subtle yet profound. Where once he saw only a species to be scorned and conquered, he now saw individuals with hopes and dreams, with stories etched in the lines of their faces and the depths of their eyes. Lila's inherent goodness, her empathy and her unshakable belief in the inherent goodness of others, chipped away at the monolith of hatred he had harbored for so long. The desire to destroy, to bring chaos upon the human world, which had once been a defining aspect of his identity, began to shatter under the weight of this newfound understanding. It was as if Lila had opened a window in his heart, letting in the light of compassion and understanding, dispelling the shadows of destruction that had clouded his vision. Each moment with Lila was a step away from the abyss of animosity that had been his destiny. Her influence was like a gentle tide, reshaping the shores of his beliefs, washing away the sediment of centuries of hatred. In her, he found not just a lover but a guide, leading him down a path of enlightenment, showing him the potential for a world where understanding bridged the gap between Netheria and the human realm. With every beat of his heart, Cale felt the chains of his past loosening, giving way to a future that was unwritten, free from the shackles of inherited enmity. His love for Lila was a beacon, guiding him through the fog of his upbringing, showing him that the capacity for love and change resided even in a heart as scarred as his. This transformation was not without its struggles. Cale grappled with the remnants of his old self, with the expectations of his realm, and the daunting task of reconciling his new beliefs with the reality of his existence as the demon prince. Yet with each passing day, the certainty of his love for Lila and the beauty of the world she represented fortified his resolve to forge a new path, one where love triumphed over destruction and understanding overcame hatred. In the heart of the storm, amidst the swirling chaos of conflicting loyalties and newfound love, Cale stood at a pivotal crossroads. The path before him forked in two starkly different directions. One led back to the dark embrace of Netheria, to the legacy of his forefathers, bound by duty and the chains of tradition. The other, illuminated by the gentle glow of his love for Lila, beckoned towards a future uncharted and fraught with uncertainty, yet brimming with the promise of peace. The turmoil within Cale raged like a tempest. His love for Lila, pure and unwavering, was a beacon that challenged the darkness of his lineage. It clashed with the fierce loyalty he felt towards Netheria, towards the realm that had shaped him into the formidable being he was. This loyalty was not just a matter of duty, it was woven into the very fabric of his identity, a bond forged in the fires of his realm's tumultuous history. With a heart heavy yet resolute, Cale made a decision that would alter the course of both realms. He chose to confront his father, the Demon King, a figure whose authority was as absolute as the darkness that shrouded Netheria. It was a daunting prospect, for the Demon King was not just his father. He was the embodiment of Netherian power and wrath, a ruler whose word was law, whose displeasure meant ruin. The confrontation that followed was as intense as the fiercest storms that raged over Netheria. In the grand throne room, where shadows danced on the walls like specters and the air crackled with ancient power, Cale stood before his father. His stance was firm, his crimson eyes burning with a conviction that was fueled by the purest form of courage, the courage to challenge the very foundations of his world for the sake of peace. Cale spoke, his voice a blend of strength and desperation, passionately advocating for humanity, for the possibility of coexistence, of understanding. He spoke of Lila, of the love that had opened his eyes to the beauty and complexity of the human soul. He argued that the hatred between their realms was a relic of the past, a chain that bound them to an endless cycle of suffering and revenge. The Demon King listened, his expression unreadable, as Kale poured his heart out, defending the very beings he had once scorned. The air in the throne room was thick with tension, each word from Kale hanging heavy, challenging centuries of animosity and prejudice. Kale's plea was a maelstrom of emotion, a son's appeal to his father, a prince's appeal to his king, a plea for a future where the next generations of Netheria and the human world could live free from the shadows of inherited hatred. He stood there, a figure torn between two worlds, yet standing firmly for the possibility of a new dawn, a dawn where peace might finally be given a chance to flourish. As the confrontation reached its peak, the outcome remained uncertain, the future of both realms hanging in the balance. Kale had laid bare his soul, fighting not with the weapons of war, but with the words of peace. It was a moment that would be etched in the annals of both Netheria and the human world. A moment when a demon prince dared to dream of a world united, not by fear and hatred, but by understanding and love. In the grand, shadow-draped throne room of Netheria, an unexpected and profound transformation unfolded. The Demon King, a figure whose heart had long been thought impervious to change, sat upon his throne, a looming presence of power and ancient authority. Yet, as he listened to Kale's fervent words, a seismic shift began to take root in the depths of his being. The air was thick with suspense, each breath a whisper against the backdrop of centuries-old tapestries that adorned the walls. Kale, standing before his father, was the embodiment of passion and desperation, his voice echoing off the stone with a resonance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the realm. His words, laden with the weight of genuine love and a vision for a new future, pierced through the veil of darkness that had shrouded the Demon King's heart. As the Demon King observed Kale, he saw not just his son, but a vision of what could be, a bridge between two worlds long divided. The raw emotion in Kale's eyes, reflecting his profound love for Lila, struck a chord deep within the Demon King. It was a revelation, a glimmer of understanding that challenged the core of his long-held beliefs. For the first time in countless years, the Demon King found himself contemplating the possibility of coexistence, of a peace that transcended the ancient grudges and hatreds that had fueled the fires of conflict between Netheria and the human world. The very idea was revolutionary, a ray of light in the perpetual gloom of enmity that had engulfed both realms. As Kale's impassioned plea reached its crescendo, a hushed silence fell upon the throne room. All eyes were on the Demon King, whose stoic expression had begun to soften, the lines of age and power etched into his face flickering with the flame of a new possibility. In that moment of profound introspection, the Demon King envisioned a future where his people could live without the constant shadow of war, a future where understanding bridged the gap between demon and human. The decision that followed was as historic as it was unexpected. The Demon King, moved by the sincerity and depth of Kale's conviction, announced a decision that would forever alter the course of history. He declared a truce between Netheria and the human world, a monumental step towards a future of peace and cooperation. This declaration sent ripples throughout the realms, its impact immediate and far-reaching. It was a decision that heralded the dawn of a new era, an era where the children of darkness and the children of light could look towards a horizon shared in harmony rather than divided in conflict. The truce, initially met with disbelief and skepticism, gradually took root as both realms cautiously navigated this new chapter in their history. Kale and Lila, once symbols of a forbidden union, became beacons of hope, embodiments of the potential for unity amidst diversity. In this newfound peace, the Demon King saw the reflection of his son's love, a love that had the power to transcend ancient hatreds and forge a path towards a future where both Netherians and humans could coexist, not as enemies, but as equals. This newfound vision of the Demon King marked the beginning of a transformative journey for both realms, a journey towards a world where the light of understanding shone on lands once darkened by the shadows of war and hatred. In the luminous aftermath of the monumental truce, Kale and Lila emerged not merely as individuals, but as living symbols of hope and unity. Their love, once a clandestine spark in the night, now shone brilliantly, a beacon across realms, illuminating the path to a new era. This era was not defined by the clashing of swords or the cries of war, but by the gentle murmur of peace and the harmonious coexistence of two worlds. Kale and Lila's legacy was one of transformation and hope, a legacy that would be told for generations to come. In their union, the realms found not just peace, but a new understanding of what it meant to coexist, to respect and learn from one another. Their story was not just a tale of romance. It was a narrative of redemption, a saga of how love and understanding can rewrite destinies and heal the deepest of rifts.